get seated, get comfortable. I know all the paper presenters present. All of all the paper presenters are please requested to be seated and present. Yeah, Aritra Basu, Silva, Dipanjali Singh, Chitra Achuri, Chitra, and Professor Nina. Hi.
मेरा नाम गलत बोलो मैं बताओ मैं जा रही हूँ प्रोटेस्ट में उनके
गलती हो गई आप
मैं प्रोटेस्ट में उनके जा रही हूँ
प्रोफेसर नीनू
अब संगीत की जगह के ऊपर
प्रोफेसर नीनू कुमार I correct myself.
संगीत को लगा अब तो मैं पिट ही जाऊंगा
नहीं मुझे लगा
सोसाइटी की सेवा
now is also nominated talks पता नहीं क्या है वो उसके बारे में तो the lesser asked and the lesser said the better the most accoladed I mean crazy state of affairs every person saw himself as that every person
so there is one more presenter Angela Jain online Shall we begin then?
yes
Huh? Yeah, the first paper is Bending the Norm, Possibilities of Disability in Avatar, The Last Airbender by Aritra. Aritra. May I begin? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arithra Basu. I would like to begin by expressing my humble thanks to Zapier and the College Evening for giving me this opportunity to present my paper here at this August conference. My paper is titled Bending the Norm, Possibilities of Visibility in Avatar The Last Airbender. And without any further ado, I will begin. Understanding popular culture in the context of contemporary theories of identity, politics, and inclusivity opens up several avenues of interdisciplinary research with an immense potential to enrich all the fields concerned. One such text from popular culture is the anime Avatar The Last Airbender, shortly known as ACLA. This anime, produced by the American studio Nickelodeon, was aired from February 2005 to July 2008. The original airing time of the show becomes important insofar as it shows the progressive mindset of the creators Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, who, in making an anime that is primarily targeted at children, did not hesitate to insert some subtle and other overt social messages within the plot and subplots of the show. One of the most interesting and impactful themes of this show is the disability of a few characters, manifested most significantly in the character of Toph Bayfong, the Earthbender. However, before discussing Toph's character, one needs to question if the bending capabilities of the main characters of the show can be considered a disability or not. In this show, there are four types of benders, namely fire, earth, water, and air. Bending can be understood as a superpower which allows the user to manipulate any one element from the four elements named above. From the anime, it is evident that this power is vested in a very limited number of people, with the protagonist Aang being the last surviving airbender in the realm. Since it is a kind of physical characteristics that sets the benders apart, can it be defined as a disability? According to Cambridge English Dictionary, disability is defined as an illness, injury, or condition that makes it difficult for someone to do some things that other people do, and that is usually permanent or lasts for a long time. If one were to decontextualize the meaning of it, it could be argued that any kind of physical or mental quality that sets one apart from the masses would render the concerned person disabled in one way or the other. One such stellar example is the constant reference to Sherlock Holmes as a freak in the BBC adaptations of the works of Arthur Conan Doyle. However, since it is an additional capability that does not hinder their day-to-day life in any major ways, rather it allows them to help those in need. The vendors of the Alta universe cannot be classified as disabled in the truest sense of the term. Disability and Toph Bayfong. There is, however, a very important character in the anime, Toph Bayfong, who is disabled. She has no vision and is introduced to the viewers as the fiercest earthbender known to the land. One of the most popular websites for discussing popular culture, fandom.com, says the following about her. And I quote, Toph Bayfong is an earthbending master, one of the most powerful of her time, and the discoverer of metal bending. Blind since birth, Toph was constantly treated condescendingly because of her visual impairment, particularly by her overprotective parents, Lau and Poppy Bayfong. Upon discovering badger moles, earthbending animals who are also blind, she learned how to use earthbending as an extension of her senses. This gave her the ability to see every vibration that passes through the ground. Therefore, it comes to the viewers as no surprise that she could use her hearing senses, elevated as they were, to sense every vibration that the earth had to offer, thus practically eliminating her disability in the process. However, this brings into question an essentially ethical conundrum. If her disability were to be eliminated by hurting her other senses, then what was the point of making her disabled in the first place? The nomenclature of the term disabled comes into the discourse here as a comparative term against the phrase specially able. Disability as a discourse seeks to establish the fact that those who are disabled do not need to conform to the ableist standards of society. Even in their state of disability, they could indeed outdo the expectation that one has from them. Therefore, when Toph manages to be one of the bending masters who teaches Aang the art of art bending, does it not become one kind of overcompensation for the disability? In the course of her anime, she also invents metal bending, something that was hitherto thought as unbelievable. And in the sequel of this anime, The Legend of Korra, the viewers are also informed that she developed a full metal bending police force as the chief of police. In Atla, she stands out as the most significant character after Zuko and Katara, the former being the anti-hero and the latter being the standard companion of the protagonist in his quest for glory. Is it her disability that allows her this much importance, or is it her sheer quality that shunts her disability to a corner by allowing her to rise through the ranks of society within the show? Top's disability is not a restraining factor for her. Rather, it becomes one of her unique characteristics. In one of the episodes of the show, she mentions how not being able to see allows her to concentrate more on the vibrations around her and manipulate them to enhance her bending capabilities. This falls perfectly in line with the understanding that once any person loses one of their senses, their body adapts to the situation by enhancing the other basic senses that they possess. From another perspective, this anecdote shared by Toff also sits well with the basic understanding of physics, where every element has its own wavelength, vibrations, and frequency, which can be measured using scientific equipments. Therefore, one can say that her superior earth-bending powers that allowed her to win all those earth-bending matches as the Blind Bandit was a circumlocuted consequence of her disability. It cannot be said with absolute certainty that she would not have had such extraordinary bending abilities had she not been blind. But from the information given to the viewers in the show, this disability of hers seems to be a catalyst in the process. Disabling the supremely able. Another instance of disability occurs in the finale of the anime, where in his ultimate battle against Ozai the Fire Lord, Aang uses his powers of the Avatar to the fullest extent and takes away the fire-bending capabilities of Ozai. Throughout the series, we see Ozai being unreasonably proud of his fire-bending skills and using them to hunt down the Avatar. Initially, he sends his son Zuko on the quest for the Avatar, and then comes down to the playing field himself. In the third season of the show, the team comprising Aang, Katara, Sokka, Chopper, and Zuko reach the Firebending Nation in order to wait for the solar eclipse. Would it have been possible for Aang to strip Ozai of his powers had he not been aided by the eclipse? This is not for us to discuss. However, a more important question in this context is the stripping of a special ability by a superior power who allegedly sides with the morally right characters of the show. Disability in any individual can either be from birth or acquired during one's lifetime. However, Aang's actions against Ozai do not render him disabled in the context of the common people of the show. In his own context, however, Ozai is bound to feel incompetent, lacking, and in more than one sense disabled. One is quickly reminded of the first Thor movie when he was stripped of all his powers by Odin All-Father. In a similar manner, though Thor's movie came later in the chronology of events, the comic from which it was taken was published much before the release of Atla. Ozai suffers also because of the change in his lifestyle. Though the series does not dwell on this topic for long, some inferences can be drawn from this particular episode. In a flashback, Aang recalls his conversation with the ancient turtle, where the latter had said that to bend someone else's power, your own spirit must be unbendable. Therefore, though bending in itself can be treated as a superpower of some dimension, taking it away would amount to making someone disabled. In the dissertation Issues of Individual Design and the Relational Model of Disability in Avatar The Last Airbender, Mackenzie K. Kelly writes about this in detail. And I quote, ability in the world of Avatar then is defined by this body-environment connection. Function will quite evidently relies on the interaction of space and bodies. The show illustrates this point time and again throughout the series by reminding viewers of what happens when this connection is either disregarded by a character or otherwise interrupted by external cause. Quite often, bending abilities themselves are disrupted. Thus, the show highlights this important norm of bodily environmental connection through its repeated disruption. This environmental relation of bending with ability and the lack thereof is built throughout the narrative of the show and even continued in the sequel, The Legend of Korra. The question, therefore, is how the ability to bend an element is related to the loss of that same quality. In a specific context where bending is understood as an additional ability that rests with a selected few of the citizens of the realm. Bending in Atla comes forward as a special ability that can be acquired in this anime, not as a superpower that only the superheroes have. Therefore, when Ozai lost it, it became his disability, especially in a nation full of firebenders. Ozai's disability, if I may use the term, is an acquired one. The agency in this case rested in the hands of the avatar, who decided to took away some of the abilities that Ozai possessed because he was using them for evil purposes. While this is the least Aang could do to ensure that the battle between the Fire Nation and the rest of the nations came to an end, it did not come without some damage being done to Ozai. This incident becomes the perfect avenue to understand disability with respect to war. The casualties in war do not end with the lost lives, rather, that remains at the tip of the iceberg. War heroes come back with every kind of physical and mental injuries, be it in the real life after the two world wars, which led to the first known diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, or infection like Frederick Henry in A Farewell to Arms. However, Ozai's fate after the war with Aang reveals that despite his disability, his sense of identity and the semblance of power that he once had were not completely lost, which according to the Avatar fandom page caused the Harmony Restoration movement. This sense of regaining his identity sits well with the social model of disability. The social model of disability, as illustrated by Tom Shakespeare, has been effective psychologically in improving the self-esteem of disabled people and building a positive sense of collective identity. In traditional accounts of disability, people with impairments feel that they are at fault. Language such as invalid reinforce a sense of personal deficit and failure. The focus is on the individual and on her limitations of body and brain. However, from an ethical standpoint, whether the morale and self-esteem of Ozai needed improvement or not can be severely debated. It is in his character that the ability of firebending is imbued to the highest potential, and thus when it is taken away from him, his disability becomes all the more difficult for him to bear with. This is not the case with Korra, who loses her bending capabilities at the hands of Aemon in the first season of Legend of Korra. Her bending was eventually restored by Aang's energy bending. Therefore, with these instances, it becomes clear that, like some forms of disability, the lack of one's presence bending abilities can be restored by some superior powers, just like some forms of disability can be permanently treated through medicine, surgery, or a combination of the two. Thank you.
I think we should have the papers first and then we will take the questions.
So next paper is by Silpa. Title is Visible Superheroes in the Early History of Superhero Comics.
Honorable Chair Professor Sanjeev Kumar and all the presenters and the attendees of the seminar. A very good afternoon. My paper is titled as Disabled Superheroes in the Early History of Superhero Comics. Superhero comics, on account of being centered around hyper-abled characters, are often perceived to be disability-defying and benign narratives. The chief reason for such a perception may be traced to the genre's genealogy. The very conception of the prototypical superhero, the Superman, is based on the idea of hyper-able protagonists. Jerry Siegel, one of the two young teenagers who conceived the iconic character of Superman, recounts his story of the conception to Richard Reynolds in an interview, and then he says, and I quote, "I'm lying in the bed counting sheep when all of a sudden it hits me. I conceive a character like Samson, Hercules, and all the strong men I've ever heard tell of roll into one. Only more so, I hop right out of the bed and write this down. And then I go back and think some more for about 2 hours, get up again and write that down. This goes on all night at 2 hour intervals until in the morning I have a complete script. This is how the iconic Superman was born. The first issue of Action Comics, bearing the images of the wondrous physical feats of Superman, such as leaping over the buildings and running faster than a speeding bullet, bears evidence to Siegel's anecdotal reminiscence that the core of the very conception of the original Superman begins with the embodied state of a mythic strong body. Superman, by employing his perfect physical body, revealed and highlighted in the tight blue and red costume for the cause of the oppressed, carefully guarding the of the secret identity as Clark Kent, provides all the primary conventions of the genre, which in Coogan's taxonomy can be summarized as the four major pillars: mission, power, secret identity, and genre distinctions on which superhero rests. Comics writers and artists, fascinated by the success of the Superman, imitated not only the genre conventions but also the mythic body on which it was based, resulting in a flood of superheroes. According to Jess Nevin's Encyclopedia of Golden Age Superheroes, as many as 5,000 superheroes came into existence following Superman's formula, creating a representational system of idealized able body. In fact, every generic distinction of the superhero comics is centered around the strong body, whether the tight and the colorful costume, which graphically highlights the perfect body, the dual identity convention that frantically guards the fantastic capability of the superhero, or the convention of dramatic origin stories that routinely recount the bodily transformation from an ordinary body into a super body. Thus, superhero comics perfectly fit Leonard Davis's observation when he notes that in discourses which are limited by the predilection of the dominant ableist culture, the disabled body is a nightmare, which establishes that superhero comics bear the foundational bias against the transgressive body by the deformed, maimed, mutilated, broken, deceased, or disabled. But despite this foundational prejudice against disability, the paper argues that the delusional construction of the mythic, aspirational, hyper-ableist superbody started to crack, and crack quite early in the genre's evolution. The realization of the vulnerabilities of the human body soon started to trickle in, both due to historical factors such as the beginning of the World War II, which started in 1939, just 1 year after the conception of the Superman in the American comics world, and the cultural factors such as the growing consciousness of the corporeal differences, leading comics creators to incorporate corporeal realities into their creation. As a result, I argue there is a persistent engagement with disability representations right from the beginning of superhero comics. In fact, not long after the inception of the superhero comics in 1938, there are powerful creative works in the early history of superhero comics introducing prototypical disabled superheroes, which not only challenge the very premise of the superhero figure, but also problematize the stereotypical representation of disability that was largely characterized at that period. To illustrate my arguments, I have based my discussions on two disabled superheroes, Dr. Midnight and Mother Hubbard, both making their comic debut in 1941, just 3 years after the emergence of Superman, highlighting how they counter with varying success the foundational frameworks of superhero comics and dominant representational modes of the time. Dr. McKnight published first in All American Comics Volume 1, issue 25, as early as April 1941, can be credited as being the first superhero comic series devoted to a prominent disabled superhero, Dr. Midnight. The first issue of Dr. Midnight also has the origin story, which tells the story of Charles McNider, a brilliant young doctor and philanthropist who is struck by a grenade while attending to a police witness of a crime, leaving him completely visually impaired. Readers are introduced to the first images of visually challenged Charles McNider, depicted as plain-looking man sitting in the study with bandage-covered eyes, surviving the accident, departing from the popular portrayals of disability in comics as an irreconcilable loss, driving people insane, as in the characters of Joker and Two-Face. He is picturized to be rather self-composed and decisive, conversing with his loyal assistant and trained nurse, Myra Mason, asking her to continue to work for him. While Myra Mason is shocked by such a suggestion, as she claims, "But doctor, your eyes." To which McNider bold assertion, "There are still things left for me to do. I always wanted to be a writer, I'll write now. Stories that will help to bring justice to the downtrodden and oppressed," he says, is a typical moment of what Otto Quaison would classify as the moment of aesthetic nervousness. According to Quaison, aesthetic nervousness is a moment in the text that captures the tension that usually attends the interactions between the disabled and the non-disabled, bringing to the fore the cultural assumptions, nervousness, and the confusion that the non-disabled hold against the disabled, open for examination and introspection during the interaction within the text. Myra Mason's astonishment at Matt Snyder's suggestion, asking her to continue to work for him, foregrounds the prevalent bias of the time that largely viewed persons with disability as being incapable to work, and in a way forces her to question and rethink the validity of such innate cultural assumptions about persons with disability. However, in Charles Snyder's bold and decisive assertion to not only pursue alternative work prospects for himself, but also to help the less privileged, not only forces Myra Mason, but also the reader, whom Mason believes are the ultimate participants in the process of aesthetic nervousness, to reassess their own outlook towards persons with disability. Such a representation is highly progressive, especially at a time such as early as 1940s, which according to Leonard Davis was a period when the eugenics ideology had gripped most of, if not all of Europe and America. It was still the time when the ugly laws, that is the municipal statutes of the United States, which outlawed people with visible disabilities, particularly in the words of Chicago City Code of 1881, deceased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed from appearing in the public. Further, the image of the central character of the superhero comics transforming into the disabled figure in the origin story is not only new to the readers, but counterintuitive to the notoriously ableist images that characterize the origin stories of the period. However, within a few days of his visual impairment, on a particular night, when an owl crushes into his study, forcing Charles McNider to tear a bandage that covered his eyes, makes him realize that he could clearly see in the darkness of the night, while he continued to be blind in the light of the day. Just like an owl, this ability to see at night motivates him to actively take up the career of crime fighting as a superhero, adopting an identity as Dr. Midnight, rather than just reporting them as a crime writer. This portrayal of deriving a superhero not in spite of, but because of his disability, reverses the convention of showing a hyper-able body as the source of such superpowers. Further, he uses his night vision to invent infrared glasses that help him to see during the daylight too. However laughable such an invention may seem, he unsettles, I'll just complete my point and then I'll just conclude. He unsettles the construct of an able body, and in a way he anticipates Leonard Davis's concept of postmodernism. According to Davis, postmodernism is an era that ushers in a new understanding among the people who realize that impairment is to be a universal phenomenon, where normalcy is viewed as a fantasy. It is a period when people realize that identities between disabled and the non-disabled are malleable, and bodies are often completed with technology, just as in the case of Matt Snyder, who using the technology of infrared glasses could see. Thus, Matt Snyder portends to this modernist superheroes who would come in the future. With this, I conclude. Thank you so much for giving me.
Thank you, Silpa. Next paper is किसी का किसी पे ऐसा नहीं कोई बेचारा नहीं disability and assertions of interdependencies in psychoanalysis first. It's by Bangalore.
Hello, everybody. As I mentioned, the title of my paper is किसी का किसी पे एहसान नहीं कोई बेचारा नहीं Disability and Assertions of Interdependencies in Psychoanalysis by Sparsh. Sparsh is a Hindi film starring Nasiruddin Shah and Shabana Azmi, released in the year 1980. In this film, director Sai Paranjpay weaves a narrative around the lives of Anirudh Parmar, a principal of Navjeevan Andhra Vidyalaya, a school for the blind, and Kavita Prasad, a recently widowed young woman. Sparsh, a Hindi word, clumsily translates to touch in English. The film reveals in a manner nuanced and complex the many ways in which lives of the sighted and the blind come into contact, interact, and are shaped by one another. In this paper, I managed to closely read the film written by Sai Paranjpai herself to highlight the ways in which disability bears upon individual lives in their attempts to form interpersonal relationships. I borrow primarily from the works of Mike Oliver and brings into its critical ability as well. The film offers an insightful character study of both Anirudh and Kavita, who are depicted as multifaceted individuals. In offering this humane and all-round characterization, the film keeps away from establishing an oppressed versus emancipated binary, where the disabled are forever tainted by the limits of their disability, while the able-bodied have to bear the burden of being accomplished saviors. The film refuses to take a moral high ground, instead puts forth an incisive take on the relationship between two dynamic individuals and their environment. The very title of the film, Sparsh or Touch, helps one locate its equals. Touch involves a form of communication, conveying not merely sensory experiences but also social, emotional, and impersonal knowledge. Shannon Walters, in her essay, A Ground of Touch, Interdependencies of Person, Place, Thing, writes, touch is both a noun and a verb. One can touch and be touched. This grammar of touch indicates the fundamental property of touch as inherently relational and conditional, bringing bodies together in social material enactments of interdependence. The film is vectored along these lines of interdependence and selfhoods, viewed through the prism of disability. Anirudh Parmar is a self-assured man holding his dignity dear to himself. While he is blind, he refuses to be patronized by those around him. Just 15 minutes into the film, Sai Paranjpai makes this theme overt. Anirudh's assistant, Jagdish, fusses over Anirudh's cigarettes, his medicines, his cup of tea, continually stopping Anirudh mid-task and doing it himself. When Anirudh asks why he, a young man with all the excitements of life awaiting him, prefers to spend his evenings with Anirudh, Jagdish jokingly responds by saying, "Sir, मैं चाहता हूँ आपके लिए indispensable हो जाऊँ. I want to become indispensable." Anirudh smiles indulgently and says, "जानते हो जगदीश, जिस दिन मुझे ये लगेगा कि तुम्हारे बगैर मेरा काम नहीं चल सकता, उस दिन तुम्हारी छुट्टी हो जाएगी. The day I feel I cannot do without you, that day you will be sad." The dogged attempts at refusing to seek help from anybody stems from Anirudh's own experiences in society. His interactions with the sighted individuals around him, including Kavita, is altered by the charitable impulse that they feel for him. Kavita, for instance, repeatedly attempts to help Anirudh in everyday activities, the kind he is perfectly capable of performing. He continually breaks out of the disempowering assumptions of disabled individuals as only recipients of care. At the end of their first interaction, when Kavita offers to help him climb down the stairs leading up to her house, he promptly responds, "मैं जैसे आया था वैसे ही चला जाऊंगा. I shall leave just how I came," alerting the viewer towards the ways in which disability is contested in the mundane, everyday activities. The ways in which a disabled individual carries on and deals with a disabled society on an everyday basis perseveres even without the whimsical offerings of help or charity. As Anirudh remarks while pouring himself a cup of coffee, "ये तो मेरा रोज का काम है. I do this daily." His behavior serves as a model to resist against the paternalistic control of those around him, which robs him of his agency to grow and evolve as an individual through experiences. The assertion presents an example of Mike Oliver's instructive differentiation between impairment and disability within the conceptions of the social model of disability. Instead of seeking to remedy the aspects of society which inhibit a disabled individual's assimilation into it, the problem is deemed to be residing strictly and simply in the body and mind of the disabled person. Anirudh's command over his life and his repeated assertions of this seems to reveal that impairment cannot completely strip a person of their agency. It is society's ableist perceptions which engender mistreatment. In her essay Dynamics of Care and Control, Meeting Social and Psychic Needs, Deborah Mark writes, "The way in which disability within a medicalizing culture is treated as sickness it is hardly surprising that the fear of returning to an infantile state of dependency is associated with disability and illness. In order to acknowledge the interdependent nature of human relationships, many UK disability rights activists have set up centers for integrated or interdependent rather than independent living. This helps to begin and address the fantasies of independence. And I feel this is a very instructive phrase when reading disability studies, fantasies of independence. The process of normalizing the society was to be undertaken with the obedience and compliance of the divine members from the normative, whose power of will and judgment was to be continually called into question. In doing so, people with disabilities had to be objectified, as Freeman calls it, and simplified as physically impaired, insane, handicapped, mentally ill, retarded, and deaf. They had to be identified as members different and separate from the general population and their normalized characteristics. Disability, thus, is encoded with traits such as passivity, meekness, dependency, which, while it allows for the easy identification and governance of disability, also establishes a power hierarchy between the disabled person who is dependent and the non-disabled person who is the caregiver. Anirudh's status as a teacher, a caregiver for hundreds of blind children at Navjeevan under Vidyalaya, complicates the watertight binaries of giving and receiving care within the active disability. While he himself is a blind man requiring the enabling structural support around him, he, in turn, is depicted as someone capable of extending such support to his students. At the beginning of the film, Sai Paranjpai depicts him as a man wholly dedicated to his role as a teacher. He is alert to the needs of his students, undertakes managerial and pedagogical tasks with equal flair and ease. At his school, he is able to engender a space where blind children can learn in an empowering environment, unencumbered from the prescriptive limits of society. In doing so, the film presents uncommon visuals where blind students indulge in activities which are deemed unsuitable for them. The film allows blind children their frolic and fun, while also bringing forth the commonplace emotion of jealousy and rivalry that growing children deal with. A few minutes into the film, the students of Navjeevan Andhra Vidyalaya, when faced with a hopelessly dreary food in their hostel mess, break into a delightful song, Hi Kaise Uljhan Fir Se Aalu Banquet. Oh what trouble, yet again they serve Aalu Banquet. These seemingly trivial scenes really is at the heart of the film, which attempts to alter dominant discourses which deem disability as a freakish aberration, inextricably removing a disabled person from the ambits of society. Instead, the film deems structural support from society as the very right of disabled people. In one of the scenes, Anirudh calls to question the consistency of philanthropy shown towards blind children. He explains that storybooks in Braille are sparingly published, leaving teachers like him with no recourse but to rely simply on textbooks. He asks, हल्की फुल्की कहानियों से दिल बहलाने वाली किताबें कितनी हैं Braille में? But where are their storybooks in Braille? Beyond the utilitarian uses of textbooks for subjects like geography and mathematics, all of which ensure basic education, blind children are robbed of the abundance of imagination with stories of Sinbad or Birbal and Jemma. In an essay elucidating the role of activities in the lives of growing children with disability, the author speaks of the need to diversify the range of activities, including but not limited to dramatic play, exploration of natural materials, gross motor activities, dramatization, construction, learning centers, field trips, music and instruments, and art activities. Interestingly, under Anirudh's tutelage, the children engage with each of these aspects of learning. They play musical instruments, they sneakily read books even past their bedtime, make chairs and candles, and play sports like kabaddi and tug of war. Not only blind children, but sighted people like Pappu and Kavita also join in the game of cricket or listen to the transistor together, expanding individual entities to experience the joy of collectively shared pleasures. What is engendered is companionship, yearned for by the blind and the sighted alike. Shannon Walters presents the idea of rhetorical touch. She writes, rhetorical touch connects people to people and also to non-human material bodies such as places and things. Since disability is increasingly understood as hinging on the interaction between a range of human, animal, and non-human bodies, natural and material spaces, as well as traditional and innovative assistive devices. Exploring these interactions is critical, particularly to supplement critical gaps in knowledge. Sparsh fills this gap in critical discourse incisively. The connection of people to people, robustly held interdependency, is highlighted most overtly through the character of Kavita when the site of action is the Jivananda Vidyalaya. At the beginning of the film, Kavita is shown as an aloof individual who tends to bonsai plants and shies away from society. She is lonely, lacks companionship, grieved at the untimely death of her loving husband, Prasad. When she begins to dedicate time to the school for blind, her perspective towards life shifts. She rejoices in learning how to teach. She realizes that references to seeing one's reflection will serve no purpose in a classroom for the blind and begins to adapt her references. At the very onset of her time in the school, Anirudh establishes a space of equalized function and relations. He says, किसी का किसी का एहसान नहीं, कोई बेचारा नहीं. Nobody is favoring anybody and nobody here is a poor soul. This sets the tone for the film, where the experience of disability does not become a phantasm of able-bodied projections that infantilize the participants well beyond childhood. Kavita begins to contest the ideas of the normative and challenge notions of a disabled society. At the beginning of the film, she thinks of disabled students as those set apart from the ordinary. Soon enough, when Anirudh and Kavita fall in love with each other, Kavita begins to challenge commonly held social values. In one of the scenes after her engagement with Anirudh, where she buys a sari, she prefers a sari not for its color but how the sari feels at touch. Normative assumptions on value, beauty, and function are thus modified. The light of companionship, when it shines on the isolated lives of both Kavita and Anirudh, coaxes them both out of darkness. At one point in the film, Kavita tells Anirudh, अंधेरे में आप अकेले नहीं हैं, अंधेरे में मैं भी तो रहती हूँ, क्या हमारे उजाले एक नहीं हो सकते? You are not the only one enveloped in darkness, I am too, can't our light be similar? For a brief spell, the protagonists revel in an intimacy founded on a radical acceptance of one another's complexities, their grief and their loneliness. The idea of rhetorical touch is instructive while one studies this film. Both Anirudh and Kavita are depicted as flawed individuals who are plagued by their own complexes. The film ensures that neither Anirudh or Kavita are depicted solely in terms of their disability or the lack thereof. Anirudh's gender politics is problematic. He becomes aggrieved each time he feels his masculinity is being compromised. In the scenes shot at a Chinese restaurant, Anirudh gets agitated when the bill is presented to Kavita instead of him. At another instant, he casually remarks, "जब दफ्तरों में औरतें काम करने लगेंगी, तब दफ्तरों में पिकनिक मनाए जाएंगे." When women come to work in offices, then picnics will be organized in offices as well. A very problematic statement. Such depiction ensures that a disabled individual is not constrained within the binary of a freakish monster or a baby. Anirudh's complexes, his flawed gender dynamic as well, is depicted in the film, allowing him a rounded and dynamic personality. Any supposed affront to Anirudh's independence vexes him immensely. These complexes soon become to impact his relationship with Kavita. He fears depending on her after marriage, especially after his friend Dhruve, who is married to a sighted woman, bemoans the fact that he had become completely dependent on his wife after marriage. When people refer to Kavita as a baby and Anirudh's marriage to her as an incredible sacrifice, Anirudh realizes that he has already been deemed the center of society's critique. It is important to note here the ways in which cultural moorings of the larger society begin to influence the relationship between Anirudh and Kavita. In an essay titled Fear, Pity and Disgust, Emotions and the Non-Disabled Imaginary, Phil Hughes writes, non-disabled people tend to treat pity, as it is deployed in the context of the tragedy of impairment, in terms of compassion and philanthropy. It is, following Christianity, a virtue, perhaps the highest virtue. Anirudh fears that Kavita is marrying him not for love, but simply as a duty, a magnanimous act of sacrifice done for the greater good. The discourse of burden trumps over the tenets of interdependencies between human beings. Anirudh's disability and society's perception of it makes it crucial for him to establish his independence in a society which continually infantilizes disabled individuals. Sai Parajpai seems to highlight this. The society, when deemed a collective, has to account for each of its sections. The symbiotic relationship between individuals is shaped by the value systems within the society, more so in the realm of disability, which calls to question normative assumptions popularized in the status quo. The film Sparsh places two individuals within a larger schema of affairs, depicting sensitively how lives touch and are shaped by one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjali. Now move on to the next paper. It will be presented by Chitra Mitsori. The title of the paper is Disability and the Politics of Aesthetics, the portrayal of beauty in Indian cinema.
As mentioned, the title of my paper is Disability and the Politics of Aesthetics, Portrayal of Beauty in Indian Cinema. I am focusing on three movies from Bollywood in this paper, which are Raman Parande, Pana and Kabil. Bollywood over the years has churned out movies that are formulaic in nature, based on similar ideas and themes, with a pungent mixture of almost identical elements. These films include a bit of everything, in the end amounting to substantial nothingness but a box office hit or a highest grossing tag. These formulaic Bollywood movies are driven by commercial success, with audience-tested formulas providing an easy way to generate profits and in the process generating newer categories of discrimination and ideas that fester into the psyche of the greater populace, as Rosemary Garland Thompson asserts in Disability and Representation that, quote, representation structures rather than reflects reality, unquote. In the plethora of commercial money-making movies churned out by Bollywood, it proves itself to be a tenuous task to locate movies that deal with real-life issues and the ones which do so honestly, with humility and integrity. In a society where some, if not all, look at cinema as an instructional form of art, one in which different realities juxtapose together to come out as the one that substantially mirrors life, if a large section of society creates and consumes cinema aimed at entertainment and commercial gain, it becomes difficult to engage with it cerebrally. The representation of women in Indian cinema is largely sexist and misogynist. It is a space that can include only a type, the tall, fair, beautiful woman who can look appealing. There are only endless boxes to fill when it comes to female actors. The paradox is that these categories still apply when the role is that of a disabled woman. The woman is still fair, fits into the conventional beauty standards, has full-rimmed eyes and dresses of perfect color which brings out, quote, the color of their eyes, magnifying their Bollywood fit figures. The rules of conventional aesthetics still apply, even though they might severely disturb the authenticity of what can and cannot be, quote, the gender female body rather than any particular woman invites literally and symbolically the scrutiny of an evaluating male gaze, hyperbolically reenacting traditional gender relations as well as confirming masculinity and its privileges. Thompson. Women always have to be in a state of performance of their femininity because her value accrues from that category. Louis Hilgere in The Sex Which Is Not My Romance, quote, but in fact that femininity is a role, an image, a value imposed upon women by various systems of representation. In this masquerade of femininity, the woman loses and loses herself by playing on her femininity. The fact remains that this masquerade requires an effort on her part which she is not compensated for. Unquote. The three women protagonists in the movies mentioned above are Zuni, Pinky, and Supriya. These are all blind women, played by able-sighted actors, Kajol, Devika Padukone, and Jnani Gautam, respectively. The authenticity of bringing to the fore the lives and lived experiences of disabled women are highly compromised even before the viewers get a sneak peek into the lives of these characters. The situation is almost similar to white women homogenizing the experience of women of color while entirely ignoring the alternate category of marginalization. The media representation of these disabled women is inauthentic and adulterated by ableism at every step. The movies have been made with some of the industry's most famous actors and actresses, the very people who have enormous power in shaping the popular imagination. As a result, these movies are highly contrived and controlled by people who are intent on making these characters look real, and in turn, hurling disabled people to the fringes of contemporary conversations about identity and oppression, due to which they face deep erasure from the stories told about their own lives. This has resulted in disabled women having their stories narrated by people with no lived experiences of disability, leading to a lack of true representation that conveys the depth, complexity of their lived realities. Both conceptions of symbolic power are particularly important for the examination of images of physically disabled women, since they deal with, quote, aspects of most forms of power as they are routinely deployed in social life, unquote. Lakangi Parande is the story of Pinky, a girl filled with myriad aspirations and hopes for the future. She strives to carve a niche for herself through dance, an art she is immensely passionate about. However, her aspirations are burned to the ground when she loses sight in an accident. The general opinion of the people around her is that disability has brought her to nothingness. One of the character remarks, "एक ही झटके में हेमा मालिनी से हेमा मालिनी." In a moment, she has gone to waste. और डांसर बनने का था उसको, इसका सर फोड़ो, उसका सपना गटर में मिलाने को. She wanted to be a dancer. Whom should I kill for destroying her dream? She is expected to give up her dreams and aspirations, as according to people around her, it is over for her. इसका नाचने का शौक अब तक पूरा नहीं हुआ है. Isn't her madness for dance over yet? This movie follows the usual trope of the hero acting as the savior who can aid the woman to overcome her disability. Here, Nandu, played by Ninatar Mukesh, sets out to देखना सिखा देगा उसको. I will enable her to see as an atonement of his crime, one where he is the culprit behind the accident, after which he lost his sight. The film sets out to portray disability but fails in its endeavor. The audience never witnessed Pinky's transition from an able-bodied person to disabled one. Her inner workings or trauma are never dealt with. The scene after her accident directly jumps to the one where she sets out to her dance studio on her own without even as much as a cane to guide her. And new reality is all the more inaccessible to her. She is never shown to have ways to process the drastic shift and learn new ways of being concerning disability. As it is, as if she ignores it, it will stop existing. The result is that she falls and tumbles all through her way back home, crying miserably, while random people try to help her. There is no empowerment in the portrait. Rather, it only displays her as someone to be sympathized with, to be pitied, and in dire need of help, which is extensively led by Nandu, who has decided to फिर से देखना सिखा देगा उसको. I will make her see again. Such prepositions are not only sentimental and illogical, but also portray able-bodiedness as the ideal state of being to which the disabled always aspire to return. Several scenes in Lavange Parinde during Pinky's journey to sight comprise Bollywood's typical song and dance. Pinky can be seen running here and there without any confusion or doubt about the directions, without any inhibitions which a blind person might feel in changing locales. Several scenes focus on her eyes, which are bright and shiny, and heavily clad with mascara, hair blow dried with clothes in the wind. In these sequences of song and dance, Bollywood's insistence on beautifying or having an aesthetic camera presence with perfect postures, and where blindness is reduced to a mere shift in gaze because the eyes still fit into the standard ideas of beautiful. The eyes are bigger, bright, and full-rimmed to enhance the shape and appeal. The bodies are slim, the gait full of grace. The head's body is positioned at a perfect angle for an overall aesthetic camera presence. The disability is limited and enclosed to serve the function when needed, otherwise it is hurled to the background. Kana is the story of Zoni, played by Kajol, a congenitally blind girl who leaves her home's protected space to find love. Her father, played by Rishi Kapoor, is adamant about not letting her leave the place where he can protect her. Cooper explains that under periods of heightened surveillance, viewing oneself and others is an activity that everyone participates in, with power or knowledge and control over the body serving as its foundation. Women and their bodies undergo surveillance to be disciplined into docility, into docile bodies. He is appeased by a mother played by Karan Kher saying, "This might be her chance to live her life." She observes, "शायद उसकी जिंदगी में कभी कोई न आए, शायद वो कभी शादी न करे." Pity and pessimism characterize the film. Both parents are worried that Zuni may never have a partner, suffer a whole life, and have to do it alone. Zuni, similar to Pinky, fits or has been molded into categories of beauty. However, her disability is also lost and found throughout the narrative. At one moment, she is performing a dance sequence, and at next, she unnaturally trips so she can be saved from falling. At one moment, she is leading the dance sequence with a perfect sense of direction, movements, and line of sight in complete synchronization with others, while at the next, she stumbles and falls, an invisible disability suddenly visible to the audience. Disability in these portraits is a perpetual play of hide and seek and lost and found, as though the heroine and the disability are two different identities that only intersect occasionally to reinforce the plot's difficulties. In several scenes in Fana, one can notice how Zuni's eye color keeps changing from hazel to brown to dark gray and even to a bluish gray in some scenes. It is typical of Bollywood narratives to move away from reality in its quest to beautify and aestheticize, to appeal and to exoticize. But in narratives that deal with the lived experiences and realities of a section that is majorly marginalized and lacks representation, such flawed and unrealistic representation leads to more damage. One does not encounter many disabled people in day-to-day life in common spaces of entertainment and interaction, not because they do not exist, but because these spaces or whatever one refers to the contemporary reality are not accessible to them. Kabil, the mind sees it all, narrates the story of Supriya and Rohan, both of whom are blind. They are introduced through common friends to engage in matrimony. The propagated idea is that disabled people belong together. They have to create a space of their own, away from the jarring ableist culture which always otherizes them. The interplay of words in the title is problematic. Kabil means capable, and the insistence is still on seeing in the subtitle. The eyes cannot see, the mind will, it has to. Characterizing disabled narratives through ableist language and ways of being is problematic as it always signifies the disabled as the other, always propagates the notion that they are disabled because they are not able, that they have to adhere to the ways of being through an ableist mode. If the eyes cannot see, the mind has to, as seeing and ability are the ideal states which one has to endeavor to attain one way or the other. One of the crucial scenes in this regard in the movie is when Rohan insists that Supriya wear heels. She immediately expresses her doubt about the same, saying she has never really worn heels and it might be uncomfortable and not visible for obvious reasons. She agrees because he wants her to wear heels. The idea is not new in the exotic construct, but is more problematic and damaging in this context. A woman is always expected to perform her femininity to the wants of the man and society at large. This is achieved by gaslighting her into believing that it is for her own sake, her personal well-being. Irrigate remarks, the masquerade is what women do in order to participate in men's desire, but at the cost of giving up their own. To conclude, an observation of the women characters in these movies establishes how largely disability is presented as an afterthought in all these representations. It is focused on, zoomed in on, when it suits the narrative, to elicit sympathy and invoke pity. Otherwise, it acts as a prosthesis which can be used and discarded if and when needed. All three characters, Zuni, Pinky, and Supriya, matched the ideal notions of beauty and aesthetics They are increasingly beautified with their heavily colored dyes, which are big, bright, and beautiful, as if to compensate for the sightlessness. They are consistently portrayed as destitute and fragmented until the savior emerges, with whom they can engage in song and dance, perform, and conform to the paradigms of beauty and femininity Bollywood and society have set. And disability is perpetually molded to fit this structure. One crucial question about these narratives, and most of the disability narratives, is why blindness is the ideal disability for media representations, especially in case of women. Is that because it is easiest to overcome and restore the comparatively more aesthetic than locomotor or intellectual disability. This problematic portrayal of disability adulterates the entire narrative on disability as ability seeps in through the crevices more often than not. Cinema as a representational medium fails when these representations turn unoriginal and inauthentic and paves the way for uninformed and erroneous dogmas about disability. Thank you.
Thank you, Chitra. The next paper will be read by Professor Neenu Kumar. The title is Intersectionality. Yes, intersectionality of the Dalit woman body in Hindi cinema through daily lives. Yes, Professor Neenu.
Thank you. Yeah, hi, I don't need the mic. Good evening. Everybody's tired. The last paper presentation of the day. There is one more. After me? Okay, the second last paper presentation of the day. You're tired. Today I'll not take too much of your time. And the movies that I am taking you people through, many of you would not even have heard of them. I mean, I take you as far back as 1936. So you probably would not have even heard about the kind of movies that we're talking about.
Would you like to sit here?
So intersectionality of the Dalit woman body in Hindi cinema through the years. Caste and gender have played an important role in the Indian society. Subaltern faces double jeopardy of caste and gender. Those belonging to the lower caste are marginalized, discriminated against, and suppressed. Based on sociological constructs of class, caste, gender, they rarely get equal opportunities and justice. The discrimination they face is distinctive due to exclusionary practices. And I quote, the institution of caste, which has been the main object of Brahmin's deep cunning, is evident from their own writings. The highest rights, the highest privileges were specially inculcated and enjoined for the Brahmins, whereas the Sudras and Ati-Sudras were regarded with supreme hatred and contempt, and the commonest rights of humanity were denied to them. This is Jyoti Rafu. And in the same context, Ambedkar says, the sacred literature contains an abominable social philosophy which is responsible for the Shudras' social degradation. This is Ambedkar. They were also referred to, of course, as the untouchables, since they were right at the bottom of the hierarchy of caste ladder. Jyotirao Phule in 1880s, coined the word Dalit for the outcasts and the untouchables who were oppressed and broken in the Hindu society. And Suraj Yengade says, and I quote, the Dalit is a universal conversation. It is a global narrative of suffering. Unquote. Women have also been treated as marginalized since centuries. And Meera Kandaswamy, the contemporary Dalit poet, she writes, for a man, the woman is the Dalit of the house. Unquote. Patriarchy relegated women to the background, forcing them to live a life of objectification and suppression. Gopal Guru says beneath the call for women's solidarity, the identity of Dalit woman as Dalit gets whitewashed. And they are living on the fringe, and Uma Chakrabarti termed them as a graded patriarchy operating within the grid of Brahminical patriarchy to make them invisible. And when we talk about intersectionality, I've already told you what intersectionality is going to be: gender, caste, class, race. Intersectionality, I'll not go too much into that here. I do so much of it. Intersectionality as a term was coined by Carlene Bradshaw, 1998, primarily for the black community and the black women. So how are you suffering? You are suffering because of the race, you're suffering because of the gender, you're suffering because of the caste, and you're suffering because of the class. When you're suffering because of the caste, as I mentioned earlier, you automatically suffer in the class race because you are at the lowest, most caste of the Indian Hindu world system. So you are either a Shudra or an Ati Shudra, or as we call them, you are a Dalit. And then you are a Dalit woman. All your rights, all your privileges, anything and everything, I'll make a cross reference to this. Anything and everything that the other woman is entitled, you of course are the other, quote. Anything the other upper caste woman is entitled to, you do not have the rights. In one of the conferences at IIT Delhi, I was talking about, I primarily work on women and disability and all. So it's talking about women and women from my side of the area. My college is Aditi Mahavidyalaya, it is in Bhavana, if any of you have heard of it. So talking about girls being raped and girls being killed and girls, the body parts being stuffed in big jute bags and thrown away. And the people there at IIT Delhi were scandalized. He said, "Ma'am, ऐसा तो नहीं होता." I said, "Of course होता है." So नहीं मैम ऐसा नहीं होता है. I said, "We're living in two different worlds." Because मेरी side में तो ऐसा बहुत होता है, and it is termed as honor. So these are the realities which are faced by the Dalit woman. Okay, now let me come to the movies that I am taking you. I am taking you to 1936 Achut Karne. You would not have heard of it. Your generation would not know anything. No, our generation, their generation. We of course know. Our generation knows very clearly our generation. But this generation has no clue what I'm talking about. Franz Austin. Achut Karne, 1936. Devika Rani, Ashok Kumar. So there is this young girl, she's a Dalit, and there is a Brahmin boy, Kasturi and Pratap. And I just give you lines from these movies. You know, I don't know, I have to learn. I don't know how to take out clippings from these movies, or I could have shown some clippings and narrated the paper. I don't know how to do that. I learned. Yeah, clip, crop, and yeah. So, you know, okay. So she goes. Here is something. The very beginning of the movie. So there is a stage singer, and he says, "Janma se achut, lekin karam se devi." I'm not going to translate. And you know, of course, the innocent love between the two of them also grows. And Pratap's mother, everybody knows that they are in love. Everybody. Pratap's mother and father are talking. And he says, "Okay, fine, I won't mind having Kasturi as a daughter-in-law." Please understand, 1936, pre-independence India. Picture that scenario. And she says, "हम तुम तो एक जात के थे, पर कस्तूरी का प्रताप भगवान ना करे कभी." So you see the non-native society. You see the people there at that point of time. who show that they are progressive, but they are not progressive at all. And of course, they do not get married and forces the line, and Pratap gets married to a woman from the upper caste, and she ends up getting married to a man from the lower caste who becomes so jealous that he comes to attack Pratap at the railway crossing. And Devika Rani Kasturi goes running to stop the train and of course dies in the process. And the sage singer says, before that she asks her father, why is it that I cannot marry Pratap? भगवान ने तुझे अछूत के घर जन्म दिया है और प्रताप को बामन, so you cannot marry. And he says, इसने अपने जीवन और मरण से ये दिखा दिया कि महान आत्माएं सब में होती हैं. So despite the fact that she's a Dalit, but she runs to save Pratap, and the man, of course, who's jealous, and it's a loveless marriage, and it's a second marriage. The second very important movie is Sujata. We all know.
Even I was thinking of Sujata when you were talking about
1959, Newton ended up getting a Best Actress and a National Award and everything. Again, Vimal Roy. Again, the same kind of a thing, a Dalit girl, upper caste boy, Sunil Dutt, Adit, and Rama is the daughter of the upper caste family, Shashikala, and of course Sujata is Muthu. And the moment she comes in the house, because the parents had died of cholera, so she's brought to the house of this overseer, engineer, and the moment the mother comes to know, played by Sulochana Charumati, and she literally, it's a heart-wrenching scene. Actually, I wish I could do that. The moment she gets that little infant in her hand, and she comes to know that she's a Dalit girl, she throws her towards the ayah. She literally throws the infant to the ayah. That tells you the mindset. Every time she introduces her, she says, "Ye meri beti jaisi hai, beti jaisi hai, beti." And it hurts Sujata. Itna zyada that she creates a wall of silence around her. Doesn't say anything. So this wall of silence is, two things. It's of course her agency of rebellion. As also, her shock at the so-called betrayal by the foster mother, who does not treat her as her own daughter. So she says, why is it that you keep on calling me that? The Pandit says, इस घर में आप एक अछूत कन्या को आप एक अछूत कन्या का लालन पालन कर रहे हैं. धर्म कहता है कि अछूतों का केवल स्पर्श ही बुरा नहीं, उन्हें पास रखना भी पाप है. This is 1959. And she asks Charumati, what is it? Why is it that you say ये हमारी बेटी जैसी है? So she says, तेरा जन्म नीच जात में हुआ. You see this word नीच? This word in itself tells you the thinking process of this family. And of course, Buaji, Lalita Pawar wants Adeem to marry Rama, but that is not to be, because obviously Adeem has to fall in love with Sujata. And towards the end, she falls down. The mother falls down the stair. Or किसी का, I mean, dramatic, melodramatic. Blood तो किसी का मिलेगा, सुजाता का ही मिलेगा. इतना melodrama तो हमारी हिंदी पिक्चरों में होता ही नहीं है. And of course, and then all is forgiven. And the last scene, when she says, "तू मेरी बेटी That is the time when Sujata breaks her silence and she says, please don't say too many baby Jess yet. It hurts me to the core. And she says, maybe too many baby Jess, of course. Happily ever after. So there is this juxtaposition of wealth and poverty in Sujata. It was one of the very seminal works of its time. So there is this juxtaposition of Brahman and Dalit. And there is this juxtaposition you have to understand. At that point of time in 1956, the concept of nation as family and family as nation, that was something which was going on. And of course, there is a reference to Mahatma Gandhi and there is a reference to Buddha's Bhikshu, Anand, Chandalika, Natak, where he takes the water from the वो कहती है कि मैं तो चंडालिका हूँ, चंडाल की बेटी हूँ, मेरे से पानी. He says I don't differentiate. And there is also the reference to Gandhi, the plaque, where it says कि you have Harijans. And no, the plaque says you have to fight your own battles. तो दुनिया को दिखाना है कि तुम दुखी हो, but you do not have to show them that you are दुखी, which she does not. So this is again a very, very, very seminal. All right, 1959, 1974. And my friends, Ankur, another Sham Benegal masterpiece. Shabana Azmi, Sadhu Meher, Anantnag. Anantnag is the Jordar. Jordar is the landowner. And Shabana Azmi is the Dalit woman. Sadhu Meher is the husband. And of course, Anantnag has to have an affair with Shabana Azmi. But because despite being so beautiful, she's very pretty. Despite being a Dalit, she's very pretty. So of course, and she says, but tum to mere saath soye. And it doesn't matter to him. That was primarily and merely and only a sona for him. For her, it was something very different. And of course, it results in a pregnancy and all hell breaks loose. And all hell breaks loose, and of course, towards the end, it is Shabana Azmi who's left alone. And that very last scene is very poignant, where the camera is focusing on the family belly of Shabana Azmi. And there is a dialogue which says, तो मैं दलित, तो ये बच्चा भी दलित, ये बच्चा ऊंची जात का कैसे? So when I am a Dalit and you're sleeping with me, you might be of an ऊंची जात, but how is it कि ये बच्चा फिर ऊंची जात है? And how is it that you end up blaming me that I incited you to come and sleep with me when it was you who made all the advances? Bandit Queen, 1990s, 1987, Shekhar, Seema Biswas. I think this you people would know the story of Fuller Devi. You can Google it later. She's one of the fiercest bandit queen India ever had. But please understand, why did she become a bandit? She became a bandit because she was raped and molested by the upper caste zamindars. And when she went to lodge a complaint, of course it was not. And she was raped again by the police. She was raped. Please keep this number in mind. She was raped 300 times. She was raped 300 times by different people, different occasions. And the worst is when the Jamidar, and that's crazy scene, Google karke dekhna, for the sake of that scene, not for the sake of pornography. You would not be watching pornography, and I insist, she's paraded naked. She is paraded naked in the village from her house to the well to get water. Everybody is standing there, nobody raises a voice. So, what is happening here? So, it is not just the, when I talk of the intersectionality, it's not just the Dalit woman, it's not just the body, it's not just the gender, it's not just the caste, it is also, you want to try and teach a lesson to the community. Then you, हाँ हो गया, वे तो बहुत सारी पिक्चर हैं, हो गया ना?
हमें तो लग रहा था क्लास चल रही है।
है ना?
We can listen more.
And okay, so since the previous slide, he's the Lord and Master. So I mean, I still have Bhavandar, I still have Gulab Gang, I still have Article 15, and I still have Gili Kuchi. Gili Kuchi, have you people seen Gili Kuchi? अरे अभी तो no, it's not again. Come on, सिर्फ lesbian तो नहीं है ना, सिर्फ lesbian तो नहीं है, नहीं है. Anyways, चलिए, I would conclude. I would conclude. The image of the destitute Dalit woman clinging to her oni or her dupatta after molestation remains etched in the mind for times to come. Physical, emotional, social, cultural exploitation by patriarchy is responsible for curbing the voice of such a woman, which needs representation and agency. And the Dalit women, I mean, in which masala she does, Smita Patil does walk on a journey, self-realization when she starts, which masala is 1974, when she starts her own Mirchi factory. I mean, revolution for ready है ना, चाहे जो मर्जी कर लो. So, the Dalit women embark on a journey of self-discovery and self-actualization, which can be seen in many of the movies like Bhavandar and Gulab Gang and Mirchi Masala, although I did not get to that. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so sorry for trying to give you a जगा दिया ना, that was the
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor.
and before I go, it's always such a pleasure to come here. Always, this is not the first time. Sanjeev is here, Anas is here, Hari, Prerna, Madhumita is not here. I mean, it's a pleasure coming here and to be among friends. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We have the final presentation of the session. It will be presented by Angela Jain. That is just your field, sir. Presentation of disability and sexual results in Bollywood. I have seen online. Angela, welcome. Am I audible? Yeah, you are audible. Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think I lost connection. The title of my paper is Just the representation of disability and sexual desires in Parliament. And since we have an identification and largely for Indian audience, has a significant impact on the culture and social activities of the country, making it crucial for the industry to accurately depict the diversity of Indian population. When it comes to the representation of disability, particularly, Bollywood has often been criticized for using disability as just a plot device, and characters with disabilities are often portrayed as objects of pity, sympathy, or inspiration, rather than fully fleshed out individuals who have their own desires and goals. Moreover, disability is often shown as something that can be cured or overcome through the power of love, which reinforces inaccurate stereotypes of disability. Regarding disability representation in Bollywood, there have been some positive examples of films that have challenged stereotypes and portrayed people with disability as strong and capable individuals. But this intersection of disability and sexual desires in Bollywood has still been largely unexplored. And however, when it has been depicted, it is often shown as something that is undesirable, something abnormal or bizarre, and people with disabilities are often portrayed as asexual or incapable of experiencing sexual desire, which results in further marginalization of this population. Though in the past there have been movies like Salman released back in 1983, which is a nuanced portrayal of Sridevi and Kamal Hassan's relationship, where her growing sexual proximity to Kamal Hassan leads to the twist in the film that is the recovery of Sridevi's lost memory. But in this paper, I study select films of the 21st century and follow the change from the release of Black in 2005 to Margarita Plus Straw in 2014. Black is Bollywood film directed by Sanjay Leela which tells the story of a blind and deaf girl, Michelle McNally, played by Nani Mukherjee, and her relationship with her teacher, Devdutt Sahai, played by Amitabh Bachchan. The film explores the themes of disability, sexuality, and the intersection of the two. In this movie, when a visually challenged and hearing impaired Rani Mukherjee asks her teacher to kiss her, he says, "Shayad tumhe शारीरिक प्यार कभी ना हो." Now, he is the person she believes in the most, and he is the person telling her that. And what is also evident is an inability to grasp the complexity of sexual existence, especially of the differently abled. And in terms of disability representation, of course, Black is often praised for its mass portrayal of a disabled character that avoids the common tropes of portraying disabled characters as helpless. Instead, Michelle is a complex and flawed individual and more natural. And the film also highlights the struggles and discrimination faced by disabled people in India, such as the lack of accessibility in public spaces and negative attitudes towards them. The film does not shy away from portraying Michelle's sexual desires and her exploration of her own sexuality, and which is quite rare in Indian cinema, of course. And the film also shows the negative consequences of Michelle's desires because her attempts to seek physical intimacy with her teacher, who gives it momentarily and kisses her anyway, but starts avoiding her thereafter. So she is hearing negative statements about physical intimacy from the teacher who she idolizes. And after that, I'd like to talk about the Bollywood film Bazaarish in 2010, directed by Sanjay Leela again. And this film tells the story of a part of the Jamaican tradition named Ikhan, who seeks legal permission to end his life because he's not able to take that anymore. And the film represents disability in a sensitive light, depicting Ikhan's struggles with his physical limitations as well as the societal stigma surrounding disability. But at the same time, Ikhan's relationship with his nurse, Sophia, is portrayed with sensitivity and compassion, and the film does not shy away from depicting their physical intimacy. The phrase used in the title of my paper, "just repeat, sir," has been taken from a scene in this movie, Bazaarish, which is very beautiful. Sophia and Ikhan start to move in the bedroom, and Sophia grabs Ikhan's feet and he's sexually aroused. And he's pretty much vocal about how he feels and he wants it ecstasy. However, some critics have argued that the film still falls short in its representation of disability and sexuality. For example, some have criticized the film for perpetuating the trope of the tragic disabled person, in which the disability is seen as a source of tragedy and despair. And additionally, while the film depicts Khan as Sorry, shall we talk about the Wonderful Movie, which was released in 2012? So I'm just following in sequence. And this movie directed by Anurag Basu features a character named Chilmil, played by the actress named Chopra, who has autism. And the film also touches upon the topic of sexual desires and romantic relationships, particularly between Chilmil and the main character Murphy, played by Ranveer Kapoor. The representation of disability in Murphy has been praised for its sensitivity and depth. Chilmil's character is portrayed with respect and empathy, and his condition is not really used as a gimmick or cheap love. Instead, our character is given agency and her own story arc. However, it has been pointed out that the film does not fully address the issue of consent in this relationship between Chilmil and Murphy. Chilmil is portrayed as being childlike and innocent, which gives the impression that she's incapable of giving informed consent to Murphy's advances. And this can perpetuate harmful stereotypes about people with disabilities and their capacity for sexual agency. One of the example characters in the film, Murphy, has been portrayed as a lovable person, constantly getting into trouble when he has a heart of gold. And he is depicted as having a romantic relationship with two women. One of them is physically disabled, mentally disabled, sorry. And the film explores the desires in relationships, but there's a lot to work on still. And now we come down to Margarita with a Straw, released in 2014, directed by Sonali Bose, and that depicts the journey of a young woman with cerebral palsy as she explores her sexual desires and identity. Now, this film has been widely acclaimed for its portrayal of disability with sexual desires, breaking stereotypes and taboos around these topics in Indian society. And in this film, Laila, the protagonist, played by Tilki Kekla, is a college student with cerebral palsy who's exploring her sexuality. And Laila's disability is portrayed realistically without resorting to caricature. And this film shows her challenges in dealing with her physical limitations, but also highlights her strengths, intelligence, and independence. Laila's sexuality is portrayed as normal and a natural aspect of her life. So now we see this progressing from the abnormal, bizarre sexual desire of Rani Mukherjee in Black and Turkey's national desire in Margarita with a Straw. And just like any other young adult, she is feeling everything that she should feel at her age. And her desires and fantasies are not realized or sensationalized, but are portrayed in a very naturalistic manner. The film also explores Laila's relationships with men and women, highlighting the complexities of sexual identity. And the film's greatest achievement is the portrayal of three differently able individuals, Laila, Noor, and Hannah, in the unmatched articulation of their evolving sexual identities. And in this process, they also struggle with the difficulty of making up their minds about the category that the rest of the crowd has thrust them into as disabled and asexual creatures. Overall, Margaret destroyed a significant milestone in Indian cinema, breaking stereotypes and taboos around disability and sexuality. And the film's representation of disability and sexual desires is sensitive and realistic without resorting to sensationalism. And it has opened up a much needed dialogue around these topics in Indian cinema, challenging long-term rights and misconceptions. And Laila is not defined solely by her disability, and that is a very big achievement. And rather, disability is one aspect of her identity that informs her experiences and relationships with others.
Sorry, please wind up.
When it comes to
Is it?
Laila's sexuality, the film is often notable for its frank and unapologetic approach, and this film breaks the stereotype and the notion that the disabled are not part of Indian tragedy and sexual desires has to be the last thing on their mind and not the first. So, I'd also like to talk about two recent most popular movie series, Sacred Games and Mirzapur. Two physically impaired characters on wheelchairs, Bunty in Sacred Games and Babuji in Mirzapur. Though they are not part of my official paper, but I still find them worth mentioning in that presentation here. Babuji of Mirzapur is involved in casual incest, and Bunty is in BDSM and violent sexual activities. And their sexual activities are bizarre, has been lacking in accuracy and sensitivity, and it is crucial for the industry to move away from using disabilities as plot device and to depict individuals with disabilities as real life people with their own desires and goals. And moreover, it is essential to break free from the stereotypes that limit the representation of sexual desires and explore this aspect of human life more accurately. As we follow the trajectory of change from black to margarita with a straw, we encounter a series of positive developments, but there is still much work to be done in terms of representation. Disability and sexuality are still often treated as separate and distinct issues, and characters who embody both are still relatively rare. There is also a lack of diversity in terms of the types of disabilities represented on screen, with physical disabilities more prominent and receiving more attention than mental disabilities. While these studies are findings represent a paradigm shift in the way the subject of disability is currently portrayed in films, it is still far from openly bringing forward the concerns pertaining to the sexuality of people with disabilities. And in a broader sense, it proposes a much needed paradigm for engaging with the politics of disability and sexuality portrayed in film studies.
Indira, sorry to interrupt. Indira, could you please wind up in a minute?
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not able to.
Please wind up. Could you please wind up in a minute?
Yes, sir, I'm on the last slide. As there is an immediate drive for giving space to the disabled and removing these pitiable images of dependency in Indian popular culture. I find it this way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you so much all the paper presenters. In fact, this is not my research area. I'm not an expert of this area. Even in I would say that the perspectives that you have brought in, insights that you have brought in, and in your papers, most of the papers are comments on all of it, in fact, visual media, especially cinema. Most of them are commented on cinema, the way disabilities were presented in cinema, and where the body becomes central, and when it is commercial movie, how it becomes only an element, as someone has already pointed out in one of the papers, that how it becomes only an element that is used as a complement to the theme or the plot. And I wanted to comment individually, but as we're running late for the very today as well. So I just would invite the audience to come up with their questions if they wish to ask something to the paper presenters. So quickly, a couple of questions. I limit the questions to 2 or 3, not more than that, and we have to wait for tea, I guess. Quick questions, please. If there is any. So, if no one wants to ask any questions, so I think I should wind up the session, and I would like to congratulate all the paper presenters. Maybe later stage I will comment individually, because I have made some of the observations which I'd like to share with you. Maybe I can do it individually later stage. But at this moment, because of the limitations are already running out of time, I won't be able to do that. So over to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sanjeev, sir, for your kind and enlightening words. I would now like to call upon Dr. Prasad to confer a token of appreciation for our decorated faculty, Dr. Sanjeev, sir.
Break for a quick tea break, please make sure you're back in this room in 10 minutes. Okay? Students, quickly attendance sign करो और आ जाओ. Number 6 चल रहा है. चाय खाएं.
अरे चाय में सब कुछ हजम नहीं कर पाओगे चाय
So that you become refreshed.
या I'm like a force. I know that. Thank you, Ajay. God bless. Thank you. हरी तुम तो मुझे पानी पिला पिला के मारेगा।
मैंने तो अब चाय